Good morning, everyone. My name is Frank Bauer, and the first question I need to ask is whether you can hear me, whether the speakers are and the mics are working. Working okay? Okay, great. Well, welcome to the Graduate School USA's first Training Officials Seminar. And this is something we plan to do on a recurring basis. And I'll say more about that in a few minutes. One of our main topics today, of course, is telework. And of course, we didn't plan the earthquake yesterday, and the buildings, all the federal buildings in Washington, D.C. being closed, or some of them being closed today. But in some ways, it's a great example of how telework can assist an agency in keeping its critical operations going in either an emergency caused by natural problems or other types of problems. So it fits right in and kind of, I think, shows the importance of telework and the need for telework to be understood and accepted by managers in the agencies. We have some limitations in this room because of the posts and the pillars. And so if anyone would like to move, if there are a few empty seats at this table up here, for example, if you'd like to move to a table where you can see a little bit better, please feel free to do that. Let me just mention a few words about the Graduate School USA for those who might not be familiar or overly familiar with us. We're celebrating our 90th anniversary this year. We were founded in 1921 as an evening school in the Department of Agriculture. And so for many years, the graduate school was an evening school providing education and training mostly to scientists in the Department of Agriculture. And that evening school continues today, continues to operate today. And when I run into people almost anywhere around the country, people who are from Washington, D.C., what they are likely to recognize is the graduate school's evening school. And they'll say, hey, I took a Spanish course there or some type of horticulture course. And so the evening school still operates. It offers self-development and self-improvement type courses like foreign languages or horticulture. It also offers more career-related courses such as accounting, HR, and so forth. So that evening school, which is the original graduate school, continues to operate. I'm going to fast forward to 1995 when the Office of Personnel Management's most of the training units in the Office of Personnel Management transferred to the graduate school. We have a contingent of OPM employees at this table, but I think they're probably too young, certainly, to remember that and may not even know about it. But many of the business units within the school really came ultimately from the Office of Personnel Management. The daytime classroom training here in Washington, D.C., our leadership training program, and our regional training centers all came from the Office of Personnel Management. And so that is really the largest program in the school, the daytime classroom training, and that focuses on, and our niche really is government-specific training. And so probably what we're best known for is federal human resources management and federal financial management, federal acquisition, federal management analysis, those kinds of courses. We also do offer other daytime courses that are not quite so federally oriented: project management, business analysis, communications, writing skills, and so forth. And that daytime program is the school's largest program. Excuse me. We also offer leadership development, sort of in one way, in two ways. Shorter courses in supervision, management, leadership skills, and then long-term leadership development, which is often assessment-based. That is, it's based on assessments of the participants' leadership skills, and programs are developed to meet those skills, either the individual leadership skills, or if it's a contract, organizational leadership skills. Those programs last anywhere from 2 months to 12 months and are based mostly on experiential learning rather than classroom learning. There is some classroom work that's done, but much of the work is team projects, special assignments, details to other agencies, shadowing assignments of executives, and things like that. Some of the other programs that the school offers, well, I should say our newest program, in a sense, is our academic programs, where we now offer associate degrees and hope to soon be offering bachelor's degrees and perhaps one day master's degrees. We are accredited by the Council on Occupational Education, and we have associate degrees in accounting and medical laboratory technology. And that is almost brand new. We offer distance learning programs, so that many of the programs that I've been talking about, daytime classes, academic programs, if an agency prefers that and has a need to cut back on travel costs and things like that, we have the capability of delivering those programs in a distance learning format. International programs, we do a lot of work with the Agency for International Development and other agencies and governments of foreign countries in doing customized training for either federal employees who do business with foreign countries or employees of foreign countries. And we also manage and program a great deal of visitor programs where you might have employees of foreign countries coming to the United States for educational purposes, and we develop and program their activities while they're here. And of course, we also do a great deal of customized training where we're developing a course or customizing a course to meet the specific needs of an agency, and managing, in some cases, managing an agency's training center or training program where they want to contract that training program or training center out. So that's sort of an overview of the graduate school's programs today. And I'd like to move to the topic that we have, the topics, I should say, that we have here in front of us today. You know, we're going through difficult times, times of uncertainty, uncertain funding. I was talking to Cindy from the FAA earlier about the furloughs, the recent furloughs of the FAA employees. We just don't know day to day and week to week what our funding situation is going to be, sometimes what our furlough situation is going to be. And so the school has been asking itself, what can we do for our constituent group, which is you, really, training officials, learning leaders. What can we do to make your job, just a little bit more, a little bit easier? And one of the things that we came up with is this series of seminars, and today is the first. We identified the topics for today, mandatory training, because we didn't really have an effective way of getting in touch with you. And it looks like we hit on a relevant topic based on the turnout. But for the future, we really want to get your input in setting the agenda for future meetings like this. And so in your folder, there is a survey form that I'd really appreciate if you would fill out before you leave. It asks all kinds of questions about your preferences regarding these kinds of programs, what day of the week works best, and what time of the day. But the critical questions really are, what topics would you like to see covered? And/or what speakers would you like to see us invite? Now, if it's a speaker who gets $100,000 an hour, we may have to get back to you on that. But we'd like your input on speakers and/or topics, and there's plenty of room to write in your suggestions on the form. Let me go through very quickly the agenda for today before I introduce our first speaker. The agenda for today is a discussion of the requirements of the Telework Enhancement Act of 2010, followed by a case study on how one agency, which happens to be the Environmental Protection Agency, addressed those requirements. We'll break for lunch, 30 to 45 minutes perhaps for lunch, and then we'll have a discussion of the requirements of the Plain Writing Act of 2010. And finally, there'll be an optional tour of the graduate school's facilities, both our distance learning studios and our classroom facilities. And I would like to ask, just for planning purposes at this time, so we know what to expect, can I see a show of hands if you think you'll be interested in taking the tour of the graduate school?
How long will the tour be?
I would say 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, great. Thank you. That's helpful for our planning purposes. We hope, and we have two expectations for these seminars. One is that we will be able to give you relevant information in a timely way. And second, that we will serve here, these seminars will serve as kind of a forum for your ability to interact with your colleagues and your peers at other agencies. Because we're all facing these problems that I alluded to earlier. I'll steal a line from one of my Graduate School USA colleagues, Jack Mikowski. I don't know whether Jack's here. It's probably better if he's not, if I'm stealing his line, But he characterized it this way recently, that a few years ago we were asked to do more with less. And more recently, we've been asked to do more and more with less and less. And now we're being asked, it seems, to do everything with nothing. And so the goal of these forums is to simply assist you, our customers, in a small way in dealing with the difficult situations that we find ourselves in. So with that, thank you for attending. I know, based on the events of yesterday and the number of federal buildings that are closed today, that some of you made a special effort to attend here, and we very much appreciate that. At this time, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Alexis Adams, from my alma mater, the U.S. Office of Personnel Management. And Alexis works in the, and I always stumble over this, Alexis, so help me with this. What I want to do is leave off the first word, which is work. I don't know if that's, I don't know what that means exactly, but work-life wellness, work-life wellness program at the Office of Personnel Management, and Alexis is going to brief us on the requirements of the Telework Enhancement Act of 2010.
Thank you, Frank. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today, especially given that a number of you had to make special efforts to be here today. So I appreciate your presence, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about the new legislation for telework that is hopefully going to be expanding and improving the use of telework across the federal government. And I'm here, as Frank mentioned, from the Work-Life Wellness Office within OPM, here with my two colleagues, Dr. Hope Hanner-Bailey and Rachel St. John. And we're very busy in the Work-Life Wellness Group in supporting agencies to do just that, to improve and to develop and to possibly implement for the first time telework programs in agencies across the government. So as you probably know, agencies have always had a great deal of discretion in how they implement their telework programs, and that's something that OPM strongly supports. The Office of Personnel Management has been available for guidance for several years in supporting agencies, but we really have had no authority to direct agencies in their pursuits in terms of telework. The Telework Enhancement Act, which has now been signed into law, still allows agencies to determine the best way to implement their programs based on their agency missions, based on their agency needs, but it does give some government-wide structure that was lacking prior to the legislation. And the hope is that this law will help agencies with the development of their programs. It also gives enough authority to OPM so that we can better assist agencies, collect data on a more consistent basis. We've been collecting data for a number of years, but now it's actually written into law. And we'll be able to evaluate the effectiveness of telework government-wide and share the results of our assessments with agencies across the government so they can use that information. For the first time, there is a one standard definition of telework in the law. It's not the most user-friendly definition, but it is a consistent standard definition that we have now. And that's important for us in terms of collecting our data. Previously, we did have a shared idea of what telework meant, but now we can feel more confirmed that when agencies report information to us using that definition that's written into law, that everybody has a common and shared understanding, so that's very important. In addition to a definition, the law also provides information on eligibility by directly stating who may not be authorized to telework. So that's also important information. Make sure I'm using this clicker correctly. Okay, there we go. So to aid in your understanding of what the new legislation means for agencies and employees and managers of teleworkers and for OPM, we'll be going over the purpose of the legislation, the key provisions of the law, and responsibilities that fall under agencies and also OPM's responsibilities in supporting what is in the law. Okay, so in practice, telework is a work arrangement that allows an employee to perform work during any part of regular paid hours at an improved alternative work site, either in the employee's home or a designated telework center. This is our operational or user-friendly definition that we use. It is not the definition that appears in the law. As I stated, the definition in the law is a little less user-friendly, but this gives us a general idea of what we're referring to when we're talking about telework. It does include what is generally referred to as remote work or full-time telework from one alternative work site. It generally excludes any work done while on official travel or what we refer to as mobile work. So that's basically work that's characterized by routine or regular travel in order to do work at customer sites or multiple other work sites. So please do pay attention to the focus on the changing of the location of work, because that's something that has been tricky for agencies to get an understanding of. Again, we don't consider mobile work, after hours, weekend, or work during travel to fall under what we're referring to as telework. Telework has a number of benefits, and that's why we at OPM are so excited and passionate to have the added muscle of this law behind us to support the use of telework across the federal government. There are benefits at multiple levels that we're excited about. There are the benefits at the community and social level, things that we are able to enjoy, such as improved air quality, improved neighborhood safety, reduced threats to public health. Something like the improved neighborhood safety may not have been something that you would think about if you'd never teleworked before. But for those of us who live in the DC metro area, it's likely that at least one or two of your neighbors are also federal employees, and you find that when you're home during the day teleworking, that a number of your neighbors are also home teleworking, and there's more activity back and forth on your street than maybe previously before telework became more popular. There are other benefits at the organizational level, such as improved employee attitudes, productivity, reduced business costs. These are the kinds of things that we really encourage our telework managing officers and our telework coordinators within agencies across the government to use in forming their business case for telework. We hope that our telework managing officers, or TMOs, and our coordinators will not have an upward hill battle in selling telework within their agencies. But if they find that they are meeting against some resistance, we really do encourage them to build a strong business case for telework when they're trying to get their upper level leaders on board. And we encourage them to cite things such as improved employee attitudes, productivity, reduced business costs. These are things that hit the bottom line and very often pique the interest and attention of upper level leaders. And then there are also benefits at the employee level, which certainly is so important, cannot be ignored. Improved general health. So if your employees are healthier, they will take less sick time. Better management of life responsibilities. If your employees are less distracted by trying to manage their life and work balance, they will have more clarity while they're working. Financial savings, all of this stems back to financial savings and improved work focus. One reason that we do exclude mobile work, as I mentioned on the previous slide, is that it is not likely to relate to some of these outcomes that I'm discussing right now, such as improved air quality and other sustainability outcomes. Okay, so the federal government has been a leader in the use of workplace flexibilities, including telework. And it's one of the reasons that I'm so excited to be a federal employee, especially a federal employee with some work-life challenges, having 2 young children. It's a wonderful thing that the federal government is at the forefront of supporting flexibilities like telework. Since 2002, OPM has collected data from agencies and shared the information in an annual report to Congress. Participation by the agencies has been voluntary, so we have not really had a complete data set. But now, with the law requiring agencies to report specific information to OPM, we're really looking forward to having more concrete information to share with Congress and ultimately with agencies on an annual basis. And this information will help us to get a better picture of telework government-wide. It will help us to really learn what's going on within agencies, what some of the strengths are, what some of the challenges are, and then we can better assist agencies with their programs, because that's our mission in the Work-Life Wellness Office. Telework really can be a useful workforce tool. I talked a couple of minutes ago about building that strong business case for telework within agencies and how that's so important for TMOs and for telework coordinators. Again, there are wonderful outcomes that can be stressed, such as achieving more efficient operations, promoting management effectiveness, because managers really do have to sharpen certain skills when they are managing teleworkers, improving the quality of employee work life, and increasing employment opportunities for persons with disabilities. So again, these are some of the major benefits when we see effective telework programs being implemented. So this is going to feel very familiar to you the day after an earthquake, but telework really is a key component when we're talking about facing emergency situations. And an important component in the legislation, in the law, is emergency planning. OPM has long held that telework should be a part of emergency planning, and now the law requires it. The law requires that agencies incorporate telework into their COOP, or continuity of operations, plans. The key to successful use of telework in the event of emergency is an effective, routine telework program. As many employees as possible should have telework capability, and sometimes that means using some creativity to determine what aspects of a person's job, what aspects of a person's position can be performed from an alternative work site. As many employees as possible should have connectivity and the equipment they need, and frequent opportunities to practice telework. Even if they only telework on an ad hoc basis, we want enough practice to be in place so that when we do face in the face of an emergency, employees will be used to teleworking and they will know exactly what to do. And this will help to ensure that all systems have been tested and that they are known to be functional. So we're ready to go in the face of an emergency. So our focus is great at OPM when it comes to telework. We have a director, Director John Barry, who is very much in favor of supporting telework and getting the word out about the strengths and the benefits of telework. That has been a wonderful support for us in the Work-Life Wellness Office as we strive to assist agencies. As the lead agency in federal telework, OPM is at the forefront of research with respect to this flexibility. We are responsible for administering an annual data call to agencies. We've been doing this since 2002, where we ask agencies to report to us information about their telework programs. We assess such things as the degree of participation, methods for gathering telework data, whether they gather their data by counting telework agreements, whether they have their employees report their telework activity on their work reports, reasons for positive or negative variations in telework participation. We want to know if they're having a struggle that has come up over the last couple of years that's making it difficult for them to progress. And also we want to know what's working for them, if they're doing very well. Also, we assess agency goals for increasing telework participation. We do a progress assessment, and it also gives us an opportunity to collect best practice information, which we're always interested in collecting. So that data call is something that we're always striving to improve, and now in light of the new legislation, we've been working very hard to make sure that our upcoming data call is sensitive to what some of the agencies have been responding to in trying to meet the requirements of the law. So here's a little comparison between 2008 and 2009 that does show an increase in overall telework across the federal government, especially when we're talking about the percent of eligible employees that do telework. And we see a sizable increase from 8.67 to 10.4% between those two calendar years. So that is definitely encouraging. It is a sizable improvement, but greater expansion is always needed. Federal programs are implemented to capture benefits, but employees must participate in order for beneficial outcomes to occur. So our message is always, let's expand, and let's expand in an effective manner. Of course, we are always interested in not only the views of our telework managing officers and our telework coordinators, but equally important are the perspectives of the actual teleworkers, the employees who are teleworking on a regular basis. One of our sister groups within OPM is responsible for administering another annual assessment, and that's the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, or more affectionately known as the EVS, the Employee Viewpoint Survey. We do not administer that instrument out of our office, the Work-Life Wellness Office, but we do rely heavily on what is learned from the EVS, and we use that information to support what we're learning through our data call. Two separate sources of data. Our data call, again, is administered to telework managing officers and telework coordinators. The EVS is administered to employees. It captures the employee perception, both equally important, both equally rich information, both information that gets shared with agencies across the federal government so that they can, again, learn what's going on government-wide and help to improve their telework programs. So this is a finding from the EVS, not the current administration, which just took place this summer, but the previous administration last year. And this is EVS data on employee participation in telework. The government-wide employee viewpoint survey does have items that ask about employee participation in telework. And we were very excited that last year's administration allowed us to increase the number of items on the EVS that specifically asked about telework participation. So we had the opportunity to gain a little bit more information than we have in the past through the EVS. As you can see with this slide, approximately 66% of respondents of the survey to the survey were employees that did face barriers to telework. 7% because of technology, 23% because they were not allowed to telework, although they did believe that their job was amenable to telework, and another 36% reported that they did not telework because the respondent had to be physically present in order to perform the duties of the job. So as you can see, that's a large percentage. We are making progress, but there is still a lot of room for growth. Similarly, results to our 2010 report to Congress showed that manager resistance is commonly perceived by agency coordinators to pose a significant barrier to telework in their agency. Again, this is the perception of the telework coordinators, but just the fact that they have that perception is important information to address. So again, talking about the positive impact on telework, and we believe that the positive impact is large. OPM is driving that conversation between our agency and other agencies across the federal government because we really want to build on the momentum that we see happening now. We have support from the White House. We get our annual results from our data call and from the employee viewpoint survey, and we want to keep that momentum going and get as many agencies on board as possible. EVS data in particular show positive trends related to the impact of telework on critical job outcomes. So again, this is the information that TMOs and coordinators can use to build that business case for telework. And I will now share with you some specific findings from the EVS to try to bring this point home to you. Specifically, EVS data showed that in 2010, a much larger percentage of teleworkers reported job satisfaction than those that did not telework due to some sort of barrier. Similarly, fewer respondents expressed their intention to leave their organization when given the opportunity to telework compared to those prevented from telework due to some sort of barrier. And I have some nice bar graphs and a couple of slides to display this information for you. So the reason we emphasize this information is for the reason of building a business case, which I've been stressing, because it is so important. OPM analyzes existing federal data sources, and we provide those results not only to Congress, but to agencies. The results that we receive from our annual telework data call, the results that we are able to receive from the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, and our annual reports to Congress can be found on our telework website at telework.gov. So that is an additional resource that agencies can use to help them gain the information that they need to strengthen their telework programs. So here are the bar graphs that display that information that I was just talking to you about a couple of minutes ago. We're talking about telework and job satisfaction. In this slide, we are looking at employee job satisfaction, and there's a government-wide interest in job satisfaction because, as we all know, job satisfaction tends to predict turnover and employee engagement, and both are ultimately related to costs and performance. Most respondents are fairly job satisfied, as we can see with that 72% there on the left. But subgroup comparisons show that teleworkers are significantly, both statistically and practically speaking, more job satisfied than their counterparts that do not telework because they have run up against some sort of barrier, whether it is a technology barrier or not being allowed to telework, whatever the case may be. Research shows that teleworkers tend to be more job satisfied than non-teleworkers, and these results from the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey do confirm this hypothesis. When we're talking about employee attraction, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey asks respondents to respond to the phrase, "I recommend my organization as a good place to work." Many agencies also implement telework with the hopes of attracting good employees, and as we all know, employees sometimes choose to apply to an agency based on recommendations from other people within their circle, within their network. The item here taps into this concept and asks respondents whether they would recommend their employer as a good place to work, which is something we all want. When your employees are out on the streets, circling within their networks, you want them to be able to talk positively about their agency. The differences between teleworkers and those not able to telework because of some sort of barrier is really striking here in this instance, with 75% agreeing versus 66% of of individuals who do not telework due to some sort of barrier agreeing. So that is a very striking difference here in terms of employee attraction. And retention. Telework is not only a valuable tool in terms of recruitment, but it really is a valuable tool in terms of retention. When we have strong employees, we want to maintain them, and telework is one of the flexibilities that really encourages employees to stay where they are, to stay within their agency. Turnover is expensive to employers, so the EVS asks its employee respondents to answer two important questions. First, they ask if they intend to leave their employer in the coming year. And you can see in the small box there that 72% reported that they were not considering leaving. Of the 28% that did report that they were considering leaving within the coming year, the EVS drills down and asks them why they were considering leaving their organization. Again, this graph shows differences between teleworkers and individuals who are not teleworking among those employees who are considering leaving. And if you want to especially take a look at the second cluster of bars there, fewer teleworkers than non-teleworkers due to a barrier, 16 versus 20%, plan to leave for another federal job. So they're not necessarily leaving the government, but they're leaving their agency. So what is the lesson learned here? For agencies that don't make telework opportunities widely available, they are going to lose out. They're going to lose out on really solid, good employees, and another agency that does offer those sort of opportunities will gain. And so that's really something to think about when you're thinking about costs. It's not only financial costs, but it's losing very important resources such as really good, solid employees. So let's talk a little bit more specifically about what the Telework Enhancement Act, or it's now actually a law, really calls for. We have the top of the top in terms of gaining support for this effort. President Obama spoke in support of telework in March 2010, where he shared the phrase that has now become so popular, which is "work is what you do, not where you do it." So having that top leadership support is also certainly signaled in the passage of the recent law last December, which was written to advance telework across federal executive branch agencies. And it's also promoted by the work that we do in my office at OPM, in the Work-Life Wellness Office. Our role really is to support agencies. We are not there to dictate to agencies how they should roll out their telework programs. Agencies know best in terms of what their mission needs are, in terms of what the needs of their employees are, and there's really no way that we as an office at OPM can predict that across the government. But we are there to provide as much support, to provide as many guidelines as we can to help agencies roll out very strong and effective telework programs. So what is this act all about? The Telework Enhancement Act really is unique. It was signed into law with the intention of advancing telework across federal agencies. As I've been saying, it does allow agencies considerable latitude in the way that they implement their telework programs, which is something that we strongly support at OPM. The goal is of promoting agency effectiveness and ensuring that the work of agencies and the federal government can continue in the face of emergencies, including snowstorms or earthquakes, and supporting employee efforts to balance multiple life responsibilities, which is so important, especially work and family. And we want to promote the well-being of employees, which will ultimately increase the productivity of employees. So sometimes that's a loop that's difficult for some leaders to fully comprehend. But if we can sell the message that it ultimately comes back to the bottom line, if your employees are satisfied, if they're less distracted at work, it's going to ultimately positively affect the bottom line. And so that is the message that we want to share. So, some of the key provisions of the law. It does require that each federal agency establish a policy under which eligible employees can telework. So we do very strongly support and try to emphasize eligibility and participation. However, we also have to remember that participation in telework is not a right. Ineffective employee performance or particular duties of a particular position may keep an employee from gaining permission or authorization to telework. Agencies do have that discretion to make their own eligibility determinations subject to their organizational needs, but while also considering the requirements that are in the law. Okay. Some other provisions are directing agencies to designate a telework managing officer, and agencies were required to do that by June 7th, a few months ago, requiring employees and managers to complete interactive telework training, and that's something that both Hope and I have been very heavily involved in within our office, providing and developing training for agencies, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Also signing a written telework agreement. Before employees can be allowed to enter into a telework arrangement, they must sign a written telework agreement with their supervisor. And then also outlining responsibilities for guidance, reporting, and monitoring, which has been going on. This is not new, but now we have the structure of the law to really clearly define how that reporting and monitoring should take place. Okay. So in terms of key responsibilities, agencies have certain responsibilities under the law. OPM has certain responsibilities under the law. While the Act allows agencies wide latitude in the implementation of telework, it does outline a few specific requirements with the intention of facilitating the implementation of really strong and robust programs. So the intention is not to make agencies feel like now there's Big Brother out there watching their every move in terms of rolling out their telework programs, but we just want to provide more structure and more guidance for agencies as they figure out how best to roll out their telework programs. Agencies are required to establish a policy and notify employees of their telework eligibility, to designate a TMO, as I've already mentioned, to ensure that there is interactive training available both to employees and managers, to establish those written telework agreements, to integrate telework into their COOP plans, and to establish and assess telework goals, collect data, and report that information on an annual basis to OPM. So what are our responsibilities? Our responsibilities largely focus on support. We're there to support agencies as best as we possibly can. We know that tasks such as gathering the data that we ask for on an annual basis is not an easy thing to accomplish. And so we try to provide as much guidance as we can to help agencies with what they're required to do. The Act also outlines our responsibilities at OPM, and our responsibility is largely in a consultative role with respect to federal agencies, and our leadership role in research and evaluation of telework programs. That's largely what we're involved in the Work-Life Wellness Office. It especially expands our research and reporting functions, and we are currently engaged in developing and or administering a number of instruments to collect data. I mentioned our annual data call. That's really probably our biggest push in terms of collecting data, but we're also doing a number of other things such as literature reviews on existing research. We're getting ready to hold a number of focus groups with telework coordinators and telework managing officers, and of course we always look forward to examining the results of the EVS and incorporating that information into our reports to Congress as well. In our role in the Act, we work with the telework managing officers and other top executives, other members of agency leadership to further underscore top leadership support. Okay. So where are we with implementation? Where are agencies? How are they doing? I think they're doing really well. There's a lot of room for growth, and we're there to support agencies to continue to grow and to develop. But there's been a lot of progress made since this act was signed into law last December. Agencies have already designated their respective TMOs. They have taken steps to implement the parts of the law that were required to be done 180 days after the act was signed into law, and that deadline was June 7th. So we provided a lot of support between December and June to agencies monthly, actually bi-weekly email messages that we sent out to agencies to provide them guidance and support. We held a number of teleconferences and in-person forums to try to help agencies meet that June 7th deadline. And we are constantly consulting with agencies to help them develop their telework policies, to assist them in reporting that data to us on an annual basis, and to help them in crafting and identifying their agency goals to increase telework participation. We're also developing and distributing our guidance. We largely do this through our Telework website, telework.gov. We also do, like I mentioned, we also do a number of communications through email and our regular forums that we have several times during the year. We are very, very busy right now working with a vendor to enhance the interactive training that's available on telework.gov. There have been training modules both for managers and employees on telework.gov for several years. They have been in need of a facelift, and a great need of updating needed to be done. And so that's something that both Hope and I have been very, very busy in doing, working with a vendor, and that's almost ready to launch a new and improved revised version of training. And that's something that will be free and for the use of all federal agencies. We've also been involved in leading an interagency group of telework experts, and largely, most recently, that committee has been heavily involved in making sure that our upcoming data call is as strong as possible and that it reflects the new requirements and provisions of the law. So gaining the necessary tools to do all of the things that we've been talking about. Largely that's going to be done through really effective training. There is substantial agreement that training of teleworkers and their managers is absolutely vital to the success of telework implementation and to the operation of a telework program. So we strongly believe, as we thought about how best to improve the training on telework.gov, we strongly believed that it was not only important to outline what telework is, but also what it is not. Because in the past there has been some misunderstanding about that. And now with the law, there is more structure and guidance. So we believe that the misunderstandings will decrease. But that certainly has to be folded into our training, and it has been folded in. It provides guidance for successful implementation. Ultimately, that's one of the primary goals of training. It assists managers and employees in determining if telework is a good fit and how often telework should happen for any given employee. It encourages proactive steps such as frequent and effective communication, which is absolutely key when you're entering into a telework arrangement. Your communication styles, your communication practices may have to change a bit in order to make sure that work processes are smooth and effective through a telework arrangement. A little bit more information on what we're doing with training. The Act requires that the head of each executive agency ensures that an interactive telework training program be provided to employees eligible to participate in a telework arrangement and also to all managers of teleworkers. Eligible employees are required to successfully complete an interactive training before they can enter into a written telework agreement. The Act does not define the term interactive, so that is left up to the interpretation for agencies. But the Act does state that the head of the agency may provide for an exemption of the training requirements if the head of the agency determines that the training would be unnecessary because the employee is already teleworking under a telework arrangement that was in effect long before the signing of the law. So the bottom line is that employees who have already been teleworking may be exempted from this training requirement. However, the decision to waive this requirement must be made by the agency head and implemented in a manner that is normally done within the agency. Okay. Agencies should also be aware that specialized training for managers is available through OPM's Eastern and Western Management Development Centers. Okay. Some more information on what we are doing, specifically within the Work-Life Wellness office. Our staff has been busily developing and enhancing our web-based training that will be made available across the federal government through our website, telework.gov. A review of the content that was included in the current version of the training took place earlier this year, and we identified the strengths and the weaknesses where we needed to incorporate new information, especially in light of the recent legislation. And we also did additional research on advances made in the area of telework so that we could provide the most up-to-date and relevant information for our trainees. The goal was and is to take what was currently available through the training modules on telework.gov and improve it, making it more up-to-date, making it more engaging, making it more useful and interactive for users. So that will be ready to launch within the next couple of months. We're really excited about that, and we're hoping that users will respond well to that training opportunity. So some things that users will learn as they go through the training that we're going to provide through telework.gov. All users will be exposed to some basic concepts that we're all pretty used to, such as success factors for effective telework, how to overcome common barriers, technology considerations. There will be specific guidance for managers of telework programs that specifically speaks to how to implement a telework program, how to roll out a telework program on the day-to-day. So they will be able to enjoy information on such items, issues as determining effective agreements, evaluating or revisiting agreements, managing by results, which is huge as a manager, measuring productivity, the importance of trust, and establishing effective communication. Important skills for employees or teleworkers will be outlined, such as conducting a self-assessment. How do I know if I'm right for the telework agreement that I'm considering? Approaching your manager about telework. What are some of the things that you should be discussing when you're with your manager when you're thinking about requesting a telework arrangement for the first time? Telework responsibilities. What are my responsibilities when I'm teleworking, and how does it differ from when I am in the office, or how is it similar to when I am in the office? Preparing your home to create the most conducive work environment possible. The importance of trust. Again, that's not only important for managers, but it's very important for employees or teleworkers. And establishing an effective communication plan. These are the sorts of things that should be discussed up front and in advance of entering into a telework agreement, so that all expectations will be clearly defined on both sides, both for the manager and the employee. We've also included some updated information into our training on COOP, pandemic, and unscheduled telework. Unscheduled telework wasn't even in existence in a formal sense when the current version of the training was developed back in 2003. So that's a good example of the reason why the training really needed to be updated, and we've been able to incorporate more relevant and up-to-date information. So, telework on trust. I just wanted to end on this note. Sharon and I were talking about this earlier, the importance of trust and how the success of a telework initiative really does hinge on trust. There really should be the goal of striving to develop trust and collegiality, not only on the behalf of the manager, but also on the behalf of the employee and the teleworker. Managers should extend trust, and teleworkers must show respect for management and for the agreements that are put in place. Effective managers trust their teleworkers to complete their assignments. Okay, if you have an employee who you are concerned about in terms of their work performance, in terms of their accountability, that may be something that you would want to consider, and that person may not be best for a teleworking arrangement on a regular basis. But if you have an employee who is shown to have wonderful performance in the office, to be responsible, to be accountable, and to be respectful of expectations, then it really is time to extend that trust when that employee works at an alternative site. Effective managers trust their teleworkers to complete their assignments when they're in the office and when they're not in the office, and to fulfill their work hours in a way that was agreed upon and outlined by the two of you in the telework agreement. teleworkers who believe that they are held to the same standards of fairness really will have a greater level of job satisfaction, which we talked about earlier. In the end, really does end up hitting the bottom line and boomeranging back in a positive way to the organization or the agency. So this brings us to the end of my presentation, and just in summary, of course, OPM will continually be pursuing a rigorous program of telework research as we provide guidance and support to agencies across the government. Some of the things that agencies can look forward to is our 2011 Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey data, which is going to be shared with agencies within the next few weeks. Also, the administration of our 2011 Federal Telework Data Call, which comes out of our Work-Life Wellness Office, and then also the release of our revised training, which will be coming up within the next couple of months. So we're really excited to share those things with the government in the very, very near future. And thank you so much for your attention. I appreciate your time today. My information is there. Yes. There's not a causal relationship, but there is an impact for sure. You're right, a number of telework centers are closing across the country. A lot of that is due to budgetary constraints that are out of our control. However, we don't want that to negatively impact the use of telework, so we are really encouraging the use of telework in people's homes or other creative solutions that agencies can come up with. When telework first started to become popular, I think it was a comfortable thing to think about employees working at telework centers when they were not office-bound. As we were mentioning now, a number of those centers are closing. So we just have to become comfortable with them working in their homes and trusting that they're going to be just as responsible and effective in doing that, as long as the agencies can support them in doing that in a positive way. But yeah, you're right, there isn't a causal relationship, but we are feeling the impact of that for sure. Yes?
With your data that you produced about the employees and retention and whatnot, did you look at position type, were there any differences in terms of the types of positions that were more likely to work?
Yeah, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey asks at a very high level about position, not at a specific level. We do get into that a little bit in our annual data call. So if you want to go on telework.gov, you can find out some limited information at that level in our look at the annual reports to Congress. We're unable to break it down to a really finite level, but we do understand that that's very important.
I was just wondering if there were any subgroups in terms of increasing the amount of telework, are there certain subgroups that we should be looking at more closely if they're less likely to telework, whether it's due to barriers to choice?
Right. Right. That's largely an area why it is so important that agencies have that latitude to determine how best to implement their telework programs. There are going to be some positions that are more amenable to telework than others, and that's just the way it is. What we like to promote is to be creative. There may be certain aspects of a person's job that can be done in a telework situation. Maybe they wouldn't telework twice a week, but maybe they could telework once or twice a month and do something like report writing just on that telework day. However, there are going to be certain positions where you just have to be physically present, and there's really nothing that can be done about that. But even for those employees, we want them to be ready to telework in the face of an emergency. So we are still promoting the use and the practice of telework, even for employees who may not be able to do it on a frequent or regular basis, and really trying to support agencies in figuring out how they can provide opportunities for all employees, despite their position duties, to practice telework at least a few times a year. So in the case of an emergency, they also will have a telework agreement ready. They also will know how to log into their system and will have connectivity. But you're absolutely right. There are some positions where it's going to be less possible. Yes, one-time only training.
Down the road, eventually will be a recurring type of training or not?
That is not to our knowledge, and there is no reporting to OPM that has to be done once that training is completed. That's something that the individual teleworker and manager need to make sure takes place and happens. But as of now, it's a one-time thing. It is not required for managers like it is required for new teleworkers. However, we strongly encourage it for all managers, and especially if you're about to manage teleworkers for the first time. So our modules on our training are equally comprehensive, both for employees and for managers.
So if you're a manager who also teleworks, taking the manager training is sufficient?
That's a very good question. That's a good question. I haven't had that question posed to me. I can answer unofficially. My gut response would be I would take both. Only because there is some information in the employee version that is specific to being a teleworker and has nothing to do with implementing a telework program. There's a lot of information in the management module that teleworkers wouldn't need to know. So there is specific information in both. I think, if you go through the manager module, you'll have a very good understanding of telework. But if you're able to, and especially since it's not a requirement for managers, I would encourage you to check out both. Good questions. Yes. I can try to sum it up, and you tell me if I'm leaving out any of your thoughts. Her main thought was that it would probably be a great strength if we could communicate the use of telework together with maternity leave or paternity leave and offer that as an option for new parents, and that might be something that would strengthen the popularity of telework. Am I getting your comment correct? Yeah, that is a tricky issue, largely because we cannot promote telework as a form of childcare in any way, shape, or form. So if telework can be used to help you better balance your work-life responsibilities, and part of your work-life responsibilities includes having to drop your children off in the morning for school or for daycare, and that is very difficult in the morning. So being able to telework a couple times a week helps you to manage that stress, then yes, by all means. If that would mean I want to work at home 2 or 3 times a week so that I can have more bonding time with my newborn or my young child who's going to be at home with me during the day, that's not something that we can promote. Telework is not ever to be used as an option, a child care option. Now, you may have another service or source of support that comes into your home, such as a nanny, for example, and is fully responsible for caring for your child that is in the home. That's a different situation. But if you're talking about combining your telework responsibilities with your child care responsibilities, you yourself, then that is something that we do not promote. Does that address your?
Yeah, but I wasn't talking so much like you said, from the child care side.
Okay.
Just because you're working life and wellness. And one of the issues that you did present was that the more people in the neighborhood.
Yes.